me, Trevor, 32, officially labeled Logistics Coordinator, which really means I spend my days juggling chaos with a spreadsheet and a headset. Instead of pets, I manage convoys of freight trucks, and instead of toys, I deal in fuel costs, tight schedules, and drivers who swear they're 5 minutes out. The company's massive. Our entire existence revolves around moving inventory from one industrial box to another. No spotlight, no glamour, just warehouse echoes, safety gear, and air that smells like packing material and engine smoke. The objective never changes. Point A to point B, on schedule. No drama, the team is solid. The guys on the floor can load a 53-foot trailer in under an hour without a single word. Just a series of nods and hand signals they've developed over years. The drivers are a different breed. They live on the road, know every back road shortcut, and can tell you the best and worst truck stops in a 3-state radius. My boss, Ian, is a man carved from granite and fueled by black coffee. He's been with the company since they had 5 trucks in a dirt lot. Ian's management philosophy is simple. If it's not broken, don't fix it. And if you have time to complain, you have time to work. He doesn't care about your feelings. He cares if shipment 74B is going to make it to its destination before the deadline. Sounds harsh, but it works. There's no drama, no politics, just work. You do your job well, you get respect, you slack off, you're gone. Merit is the only thing that matters. Our corner of the company was almost entirely men. Not by design, it's just who applied. The hours are long, the work can be physical, and the pressure is constant. It was a functioning ecosystem, a well-oiled machine that ran on experience and a shared understanding that we were all there to do a job, get paid, and go home. We were left alone, and that's how we liked it. Then the email landed. The subject line was something like, welcoming our new head of people and culture. We all knew what that meant. HR was getting an overhaul. Our old HR guy was a semi-retired fellow who mostly handled payroll issues and reminded us to do our annual safety training. He was harmless. This new title, People and Culture, sounded ominous. A few days later, we had a mandatory all-hands meeting in the main warehouse. They cleared out a section and set up a flimsy projector screen. Ian stood off to the side, arms crossed, with an expression that suggested he'd rather be wrestling a bear. The big boss from corporate gave a brief, unenthusiastic introduction. Then she walked up, Lily. She was young, maybe mid to late 20s, dressed in the kind of sharp corporate attire that looked completely out of place against a backdrop of stacked pallets and forklifts. She had a bright, fixed smile and an energy that felt manufactured. Her presentation started. It was a blur of corporate buzzwords. She talked about fostering synergy, creating psychological safety, and leveraging our core competencies to build a more inclusive forward-facing paradigm. I looked around. The warehouse guys were just staring blankly. The drivers in the back were checking their phones. Ian was examining a crack in the concrete floor with the intensity of an archaeologist discovering a fossil. Lily's eyes scanned the crowd of faces. All men, old, young, tired, restless. And I saw a look on her face. It wasn't disgust exactly. It was assessment. Like a doctor looking at a disease and planning the course of treatment. She saw a problem to be solved. And that problem was us. The presentation ended with a promise to engage in listening tours to better understand the unique challenges of our workplace culture. We were dismissed. The machine started back up. Forklifts beeped, trucks rumbled. But something had shifted. A foreign element had been introduced into the ecosystem. The next week, the listening began. It wasn't a tour. It was a series of emails with links to anonymous surveys. The questions were insane. On a scale of 1 to 10, how comfortable would you feel discussing your emotional vulnerabilities with your direct supervisor? Rate the prevalence of subtly exclusionary language in your team's day-to-day communications. Have you ever witnessed a colleague engage in behavior that reinforces outdated gender norms? Most of us just clicked random numbers to get it over with. What were we supposed to say? That Dave on the loading dock reinforces outdated gender norms by being a 6'4" man who can lift a 100-pound box without complaining. That we don't discuss our emotional vulnerabilities with Ian because he'd just tell us to get back to work and we respected him for it. It felt like a test we were designed to fail. A couple of weeks went by. Things were quiet. We almost forgot about Lily and her surveys. We thought maybe she'd seen our world, realized it was functional, and decided to leave it alone. We were naive. She wasn't listening. She was gathering ammunition. Then the second email came, the one that changed everything. It arrived on a Monday afternoon. I was in the middle of rerouting a truck around a highway closure, a typical logistical fire drill. My computer pinged. The email was from Lily. The subject was mandatory workshop, acknowledgement, accountability, and allyship. My stomach sank before I even opened it. The email was long, full of the same empty jargon as her presentation. It started by saying that her in-depth cultural analysis had identified several key areas for growth and realignment. It mentioned a pervasive culture of stoicism and a lack of demonstrated emotional literacy. It said that to foster a truly equitable and safe environment, proactive steps were necessary. And then it got to the point. A new mandatory training initiative was being rolled out for all male-identifying employees. It was called the Conscious Guilt Session. I had to read that line 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. The email laid out the agenda for the 3-hour workshop. It included modules on deconstructing systemic privilege, unpacking your unconscious bias, identifying and mitigating your own toxic masculinity, moving from a position of power to a posture of partnership. Attendance was not optional. Failure to attend would result in a formal disciplinary write-up. The first session was scheduled for the following Friday, from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m., Friday afternoon. For any normal office, that's wind-down time. For a logistics company, it's the witching hour. It's when all the week's delayed shipments and last-minute orders collide. It's the most chaotic, high-pressure, all-hands-on-deck time of the entire week. Scheduling a 3-hour meeting for every man in the company during that window wasn't just tone-deaf. It was an act of operational sabotage. It proved, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that she had no idea what we actually did. I sat there, staring at the screen. The noise of the office faded away. It wasn't just an inconvenience, it was an insult. We were being punished, not for something we did, but for what we were. We were being told that our competence, our stoicism, our ability to just get the job done without complaint, the very traits that made this company run, were a form of toxicity that needed to be purged. I looked up from my desk. Across the office, other men were reading the same email. Faces were hardening. A low murmur started to build. The phone on my desk rang. It was one of the dispatchers. His voice was quiet. "You see this crap?" I told him I did. He just said, "What are we supposed to do, Trevor?" I didn't have an answer. I got up and walked to Ian's office. His door was open. He was leaning back in his chair, staring at his monitor with a look of profound weariness. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in the last 5 minutes. He saw me in the doorway and just waved me in. "Don't say it," he said, his voice flat. "I know." I asked him if this was real, if they could actually force us to do this. He let out a long sigh and ran a hand over his face. He explained that Lily had gotten full backing from corporate. Some vice president in a high-rise office hundreds of miles away had signed off on it, probably without even reading it, just to tick a diversity and inclusion box on their annual report. Ian had already tried to fight it. He told them it was operationally insane. He told them it was insulting to his team. Their response was predictable. They told him his resistance was indicative of the very problem the training was designed to address. They had him cornered. Checkmate. Ian leaned forward, looking me straight in the eye. "Listen to me, Trevor. This is a trap. It's a loyalty test, and the only way to pass is to fail." He explained the game. If we go to the training and participate, we legitimize it. We agree that we're the problem. If we go and stay silent, we'll be called uncooperative and defensive, proving we need more training. And if we refuse to go, we're insubordinate. We get fired, and they replace us with someone who will toe the line. He said, "They've built a box with no doors. Anything we do, any way we react, they'll use it as proof that they were right all along." The feeling of powerlessness was suffocating. We were being judged by a court that had already declared us guilty. The trial was just a formality. I walked back to my desk, feeling defeated. The rest of the afternoon was a wash. Nobody was working. Small groups of men were gathered in the break room, on the loading dock, by the fence in the smoking area. They were talking in low, angry voices. The mood was grim. It was the anger of good men being treated unfairly, the frustration of professionals being treated like children. I heard snippets of conversation. My father and grandfather did this kind of work. Were they toxic? I work 70 hours a week to provide for my family. Now, I have to be told I'm the problem? What are we even supposed to apologize for? For showing up and doing our job? It wasn't just about the 3-hour session anymore. It was about the fundamental disrespect, the assumption of guilt. Lily was nowhere to be seen. She had dropped her bomb and then disappeared, letting the fallout settle. That evening I got home and just sat on my couch in silence. The company wasn't just a place I worked. It was a huge part of my life. I was good at my job. I liked the people I worked with. We had a rhythm. Now, this outsider had come in and declared our entire way of life to be wrong. And the system was backing her up. Later that night, I logged into a private Discord server a few of us from the office used. It was mostly for gaming and sharing stupid memes, a place to decompress. But tonight, the mood was different. The main channel was filled with messages about the training, the same anger, the same frustration, the same sense of hopelessness. Guys were talking about quitting, just walking away. Some were looking for new jobs. Others were saying maybe it was time to just get out of the industry altogether. It was the sound of a team breaking apart. The morale, built over years of shared work and mutual respect, was being systematically dismantled by a single email. We talked for hours, venting, complaining. There was no solution. Every path led to a dead end. We were trapped in Ian's box. We could either submit to our own ritual humiliation, or we could lose our jobs. It was around midnight. The conversation was dying down, replaced by a resigned silence. Then, a message popped up from a user I barely recognized. He was one of the older guys from the night shift on the warehouse floor. A quiet guy, kept to himself, never said much. His message was just a few words. You know, the flu is going around. Nobody responded for a full minute. I stared at the sentence. It was so simple, so out of place. Then another message appeared from a different guy. My kid's school sent a notice home about a stomach bug. And another. I had some bad takeout for lunch today, not feeling great. It wasn't a plan, not yet. It was just a thought, a seed. But in the darkness of that conversation, in that pit of despair and frustration, it was the first glimmer of light. A door in the box that Ian thought was sealed shut. A way to fight back without fighting at all. The idea began to take shape, slowly at first, then with gathering momentum. It wasn't about defiance. That would be playing their game. This was about something else. It was a quiet, collective, and completely deniable act of non-participation. We weren't going to protest. We weren't going to argue. We were simply going to be unavailable. The conversation in the Discord shifted. The despair was replaced by a nervous, excited energy. People started adding details. What if the catering company for Wednesday's lunch had a hygiene issue? Yeah, the tuna sandwiches. They always seemed a bit off. The legend began to write itself. A simple, believable story. Mass food poisoning. A 24-hour bug. Nothing serious, but just bad enough to keep you home for a day. And the day just happened to be Friday. It was perfect. It was unprovable. It wasn't a strike, which was against our contracts. It wasn't a protest, which would get us fired. It was a series of individual, unfortunate coincidences. The beauty of it was in its subtlety. We would use the system against itself. We would use their own HR policies, sick leave, employee health and safety, as our weapon. The plan was simple. No emails, no group texts, nothing that could be traced. It would spread by word of mouth. A quiet conversation in the break room, a nod on the loading dock. Heard about those tuna sandwiches? Would become the code. The idea was to create a chain reaction. First, a few guys call in sick early Friday morning, then a few more. As the morning progresses, the number grows. By the time 1 p.m. rolls around, the time of the scheduled session, the place would be a ghost town. The session wouldn't happen because there would be no one there to attend it. Lily's grand initiative would be defeated by an empty room, but the real genius of it went beyond just avoiding the training. It was about demonstrating our value in the most direct way possible. They wanted to call us the problem? Fine. We would show them what a real problem looked like. We would remove ourselves from the equation and let them see what happened to their well-oiled machine when the toxic parts were missing. The logistics of the company, the entire flow of goods would grind to a halt. Deadlines would be missed, clients would be furious, money would be lost, a lot of it. And the cause wouldn't be our uncooperative attitudes. It would be an empty warehouse and a parking lot full of idle trucks. The consequences would be real, tangible, and measurable in dollars and cents, the only language that corporate understood. The conversation on Discord lasted until the early hours of the morning. By the time I signed off, the plan was solidified. The next few days at work were surreal. On the surface, everything was normal. Trucks were loaded, paperwork was filed, deadlines were met. But underneath, there was a current of silent communication, a shared look between two guys passing in the hallway, a quiet word exchanged over the roar of an engine. "Tuna sandwiches, man. Be careful." The message spread through the ranks with quiet efficiency. From the dispatch office to the loading docks, from the day shift to the night crew, from the seasoned veterans to the new hires. It was a testament to the very teamwork and communication that Lily claimed we lacked. We were a brotherhood, united by a common sense of injustice. Lily, meanwhile, was in her element. She seemed completely oblivious to the silent rebellion brewing under her nose. She spent the week preparing for her big day. She booked the largest conference room. She sent out calendar reminders with cheerful exclamation point-laden subject lines. On Thursday, she walked around the office, handing out glossy full-color pamphlets that detailed the workshop's agenda. She'd approach a desk, hand the pamphlet to one of the guys, and say something like, "Looking forward to a really productive session tomorrow. Get ready for some deep learning." Her smile was so bright, so confident. She had no idea she was the captain of a ship sailing directly into an iceberg. The guys would just nod, take the pamphlet without a word, and drop it in the trash the moment she turned her back. I saw Ian a few times that week. He never said a word to me about the plan. He didn't have to, but I could see it in his eyes. He knew. He was walking a tightrope. As a manager, he couldn't endorse it, but as one of the guys, he understood it. His only contribution was a company-wide safety reminder he sent out on Wednesday evening about the importance of proper food handling, a subtle but clear nod to the growing legend of the tainted tuna. Thursday afternoon felt like the calm before the storm. The air was thick with unspoken anticipation. Every man in that building knew what was going to happen the next day, and every man knew that he had to trust every other man to follow through. If only a few guys called in sick, they'd be singled out and punished. It had to be everyone, all or nothing. It was the ultimate test of solidarity. As I was packing up to leave, Lily stopped by my desk. "Trevor, right?" she said, her smile as radiant as ever. "I just wanted to say I'm really excited for tomorrow. I think your team in particular has a lot to gain from our session. We're going to break down some old barriers." I just looked at her. I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt a strange sort of pity. She was so sure of herself, so convinced of her own righteousness. She was about to learn a very hard lesson, not about our toxicity, but about cause and effect. I just nodded. "Have a good night, Lily." I walked out to my car, the weight of the next day settling on my shoulders. This was either going to be a quiet, brilliant victory, or a catastrophic failure that would get half the company fired. There was no in-between. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about all the things that could go wrong. What if someone talked? What if someone panicked and went to work anyway? But I also thought about the guys, the quiet solidarity of the past few days, the shared sense of purpose. For the first time since Lily arrived, we weren't just a collection of individuals. We were a team again, and we were about to remind everyone exactly what that team was worth. Friday morning, the alarm went off at my usual time. For a second, it felt like any other day. Then the reality of the situation hit me. This was it. D-Day. I lay in bed for a few minutes, my heart pounding a little faster than usual. It was a strange feeling, a mix of fear and exhilaration. I picked up my phone. The plan was to start making the calls around 6 a.m., when the early shift was supposed to clock in. At 5:58 a.m., my phone was silent. The world was quiet. Then, at 6:01 a.m., a text message popped up in the Discord. It was from one of the forklift operators. Just a single green-faced emoji, the one that looks like it's about to be sick. It was the signal. The first domino had fallen. A few seconds later, another one appeared, then another. Within minutes, the channel was a cascade of green faces, thumbs down emojis, and memes of people clutching their stomachs. A quiet, digital roll call. Everyone was present and accounted for. Everyone was on board. I took a deep breath. It was my turn. I drafted a simple, professional email. Sent it to Ian's work address and the general HR inbox. Subject, sick day, Trevor, body. Good morning. I woke up feeling extremely unwell. I believe it may be food poisoning. I will be taking a sick day today and will be unreachable. I will check in on Monday. Regards, Trevor. Short, to the point. No excessive detail. I hit send. The sound of the email swooshing out into the void was deafening. No turning back now. I turned my phone on silent, put it on the charger, and left it in the bedroom. Part of the plan was radio silence. No answering calls, no replying to texts. We were sick after all. I went to the kitchen and made a pot of coffee, my hands surprisingly steady. Now, all there was to do was wait. I spent the morning trying to distract myself. I put on a movie, tried to read a book, did some chores around the house. But my mind kept drifting back to the office. I pictured the phones ringing off the hook, the empty dispatch office, the silent warehouse, the parking lot, usually full to bursting by 8 a.m., now a vast, empty expanse of asphalt. I imagined the slow dawning horror on the faces of the few non-male employees as they realized the scale of what was happening. Most of all, I pictured Lily. I imagined her walking in, full of purpose, ready for her big day. I saw her heading to the conference room, her pamphlets and presentation notes in hand. And I saw her opening the door to an empty room, a room full of empty chairs, a blank projector screen, and the crushing weight of her own irrelevance. The thought brought a grim smile to my face. Around noon, I couldn't stand it anymore. I had to know what was happening. I went and got my phone. I had 17 missed calls. 10 were from my direct office line, which meant someone was frantically trying to get a hold of me. 5 were from Ian. 2 were from a number I didn't recognize, but I assumed it was Lily, getting desperate. My text messages were a similar story. A flood of, "Where are you?" and "Call me urgently" from the few people still at the office. But the real story was on the Discord server. Someone had a friend in the administrative department, one of the few women who was sympathetic to our side. She had been feeding him updates all morning. He was posting them for the rest of us to see. It was like reading a live blog of a controlled demolition. 8 a.m. The phones are already going crazy. None of the morning trucks have left the yard. 8:30 M. Ian just walked in. He looks calm, too calm, like he knows something. 9:15. Lily is here. She's walking around with a confused look on her face. She keeps peeking into the empty dispatch office. 10 a.m. The big boss just showed up. The guy who runs the whole division. He never comes here. He went straight to Ian's office. The door is closed. I can hear shouting. 10:30 a.m. Lily tried to talk to the big boss as he was leaving. He literally walked right past her like she was invisible. 11 a.m. She's been making calls from her office for the last hour. She looks pale. 12 p.m. The administrative staff has been tasked with calling every single male employee. No one is answering. They're all going straight to voicemail. 12:30 p.m. An email just went out from corporate. All outgoing shipments are officially suspended for the rest of the day due to unforeseen operational disruptions. We had done it. We had stopped the heart of the company. The posts were met with a wave of triumphant memes and messages, the digital equivalent of a victorious cheer. We had taken the high-stakes game of Tetris and simply walked away from the screen, and the whole system had collapsed into a pile of blinking error message blocks. The afternoon was more of the same. The chaos at the office continued. Lily, according to our source, spent most of the afternoon in her office with the door shut. The few remaining employees were sent home early. The building fell silent. That evening, we got the most complete version of the story from Ian himself. He called a few of us, one by one, not on a conference call, nothing official, just a friendly check-in. His voice was tired, but I could hear an undercurrent of something that sounded a lot like pride. He told us what happened when the big boss had called him into his office. The man was apoplectic. He was screaming about breach of contract, about losing key clients, about the multi-million-dollar hit the company was taking for every hour of downtime. He demanded to know what was going on, and Ian, in a masterful performance, played the role of the concerned, baffled manager. He laid out the facts, plain and simple. He showed him the list. Over 150 male employees, all out sick. He showed him the emails, all arriving between 6 and 8 a.m., all citing the same symptoms. Food poisoning. He even pulled up his own safety email from Wednesday about food handling, a subtle, "I told you so." He explained that there was no way to prove it was a coordinated action. It was just a terrible, unfortunate, and costly coincidence. The big boss was a numbers guy. He didn't care about culture or ideology. He cared about profit and loss. And the numbers on that day were a disaster. He asked Ian what could have possibly caused such a dip in morale that it would lead to a mass psychosomatic event like this. And Ian, very carefully, laid the blame exactly where it belonged. He mentioned the new HR initiative, the mandatory workshop, the unfortunate timing. He said his team felt unappreciated and misunderstood, that they felt they were being punished for simply doing their jobs. He never mentioned a protest. He just connected the dots. The big boss was silent for a long time. The gears were turning in his head. He was weighing the cost of a 3-hour conscious guilt session against the cost of an entire day of lost operations. It wasn't even a contest. He left Ian's office and stormed past Lily without a word. A few hours later, an official email went out from corporate headquarters. It announced that, in light of recent operational feedback, the Acknowledgement, Accountability, and Allyship Workshop Series was being postponed indefinitely to allow for a strategic reassessment of our training priorities. Postponed indefinitely. The 3 sweetest words in the English language. We had won. It wasn't a loud, bombastic victory. It was quiet. It was decisive. We hadn't broken any rules. We hadn't given them any ammunition to use against us. We had simply demonstrated our own value by creating a vacuum. We had let our absence speak louder than any protest ever could. The weekend was the most relaxing I'd had in years. The cloud of dread that had been hanging over us was gone. Monday morning arrived. Walking back into the office was a strange experience. The air was different. The tension was gone. It felt like the day after a storm, when the sky is clear and you can breathe again. All the guys were back. There were no celebrations, no high fives, just a shared, silent understanding. A quiet nod between men who had stood together and held the line. The respect we had for each other had deepened. We had been tested as a unit, and we had not broken. Lily was at her desk. She didn't look up as we walked past. She was staring intently at her computer screen, but I could tell she wasn't reading anything. Her power was gone. Her grand vision of re-educating the male workforce had crumbled into dust. She had tried to play a game of chess, but we had simply flipped the board over. All her theories about power dynamics and systemic privilege had been undone by a simple, practical reality. Without us, the trucks don't move. She was no longer a cultural visionary. She was just an HR administrator in a company that moved boxes. And she knew it. Everyone knew it. I saw Ian by the coffee machine. He was pouring himself a cup, his back to me. As I walked past, he spoke without turning around. "Glad everyone is feeling better," he said, his voice a low rumble. "We've got a hell of a backlog to clear." It was the only acknowledgement we ever got, and it was the only one we needed. Life at the company went back to normal, or rather, a new normal. The work was the same. The deadlines were just as tight. The pressure was still on. But something fundamental had changed. We had been pushed, and we had pushed back. Not with anger or aggression, but with a quiet, unshakable solidarity. We had reminded the people in the glass offices of a simple truth they had forgotten, that the company wasn't built on mission statements or diversity initiatives. It was built on the men who showed up every day, in the cold and the heat, and did the hard, unglamorous work of making things go. Lily stayed with the company for a few more months. She never tried another initiative. She stuck to payroll and paperwork. The bright, confident energy was gone, replaced by a quiet, defeated professionalism. Eventually, She left for a job somewhere else. No one really noticed she was gone. We never talked about that Friday again. We didn't need to. It became a part of our shared history. A silent pact. We had been backed into a corner, and we had found a way out. We hadn't asked for respect. We had demonstrated our necessity. And that was a lesson that no one in that company would ever forget.